Welcome to the CANA Connection podcast. On this special spotlight edition of the CANA Connection, we have two guests. I have Renee Carlucci and Norm Reitter of CANA, and Renee is a Principal Operations Research Analyst, and Norm is our Chief Operating Officer. Do I have that right? Did I get that right, you guys?
Okay. Got it right.
But today, I asked them both to be on the CANA Connection Spotlight because they are MORS fellows, and one of our recent fellow CANAers, Mr. Walt DeGrange, recently won one of the MORS awards, and I was going to have him on for a spotlight edition, but he suggested I talk to you guys because you're MORS fellows. So I have no idea what a MORS fellow is, so I'll ask you guys. And welcome, Renee and Norm. So
thanks, Koa.
Should we start with the discussion of what MORS is?
Yeah, actually, that's even better. Yeah. So, because I often forget, being part of CANA and previous companies and everything like that, we've had many fellow employees that have been members of MORS. So MORS is the Military Operations Research Society, but also that doesn't really explain anything. So Renee, please explain to me and the rest of everybody else what MORS is.
Well, it was a society that formed with members, with analysts from the services way back when. They used to have a couple of symposia a year. And at one point in time, they finally got formally incorporated. My dates, I believe it was around 1966. I could be wrong. It was a place where analysts from across the national security arena could come together and share their analysis, which might be classified. And it was a great place for them to get feedback on what they were doing. So the society started way back then. I first got involved when I worked for the Army, and then when I went to the Marine Corps, I was working at Combat Development Command. That's when I really got involved in MORS, attending and briefing at the annual symposiums. There's now just one a year, and then there's a number of special meetings held during the year. I know I helped out with a number of special meetings, and then became a working group co-chair for special operations and military operations other than war. It was a working group that I worked with for a number of years. And I'll stop now and let Norm chime in with anything he wants to add.
Yeah. Thanks, Renee. It's really good history. I'd add to this, MORS is a collection of government, military, and non-government people. We all come to the society as analysts and looking at identifying different challenges that are happening, as Renee mentioned, within the national security community and ways to solve those through analytics. We have a really interesting combination of sponsors who kind of guide the society in terms of providing us input into some of the big challenges that they're facing in each of the military services, Office of Secretary of Defense, and Department of Homeland Security. And then we also have a really interesting partners group who are a combination of industry partners and federally funded research and development centers, UARCs, who come together to support MORS through basically by providing people who want to participate and have memberships and things like that. So MORS is governed by a board of directors that Renee and I both have been part of. They also have officers of society, which are on the executive council. So you have, I believe this year they have 24 voting members of the board, 24 or 28.
Talking about the kind of like the different sets of people that are going to be in MORS. Like, so I was part of MORS for a very brief period of time because you got me to go to the wargaming one because I would like to go to another one. So I need to stay on top of MORS stuff.
And, you should.
For those who are listening, watching, or whatever like that, other than being the producer for the podcast, I am a avid strategist gamer or whatever you want to call it. And Norm is like, oh, you'd probably get something, be cool to go to the Moors and be part of that. And obviously, it's kind of your level of involvement kind of depends upon your level of expertise and knowledge. And but there is a vast forum of people willing to share like thoughts and ideas on, at least for me, uh, gaming and wargaming, which was interesting. So I know a very small
Absolutely.
sliver of Moors from a personal experience. Um, Renee, have you ever done any of the wargaming stuff for Moors?
Absolutely. And I think it was in 2011, I brought my two sons to the symposium at Monterey, and they helped with the Moore's work. We had a special wargaming focus at that particular symposium, and they helped run the war games and got them involved as well. It was really fun.
Yeah, it's fantastic. There's all kinds of different, other than the wargaming, which was interesting to me, there's all different segments. And I wasn't prepared or knowledgeable enough, like, because it's so vast, but there are these many, many categories of expertise within Moors. So, and you guys are both fellows. So that was kind of this whole, the impetus behind this was like, and Walt was like, people probably don't know what a Morse Fellow is, and I definitely do not know what a Morse Fellow is. I know it's a position of cherished, honored, whatever within the Morse organization. So tell me about being a Morse Fellow and what all that encompasses. And is there like, I don't know who to
Yeah.
ask.
Yeah.
It is a big honor, and I think there have been 89 fellows to date since Morse was incorporated. No more than 5 a year can be elected. They have to be nominated and elected by the board of directors. And it is a big honor, and it's based on, you know, there is criteria for being a Morse Fellow that they use for the nomination process, but basically, long-standing service to the society. And Norm and I have both been involved in wars for many years, supporting, at the working group level. As you mentioned, there's 30 some working groups at every symposium. There's communities of practice. We've been involved in those. And they have meetings all the, year round. We have an educational professional development colloquium that we run every year. We've both been involved in those. We have something called the ETF. Help me out, Norm.
Yeah.
That's it.
The Emerging Techniques Forum.
Yes, that happens every year. Emerging Techniques Forum. So, and then there's all these special meetings or workshops on various topics of interest to the community. Most recently, AI and autonomous systems. There were several meetings related to that, and Norm and I were both involved in those. But so people that have been supporting the society and involved in the many activities, they may get nominated by their peers. Anyone can submit a nomination for someone, and the board of directors will process those nominations and vote. And I was elected a fellow in 2018. And Norm, when were you elected?
I was elected in 2020. So, yeah, being a fellow is considered the highest honor of the society to be inducted in, and having that fellow's title bestowed on you. And it's just impressive. We get together once a year as fellows, and we just review like everybody who's been a fellow and who's currently a fellow, and it's just an impressive group. So I'm really thankful, feel very privileged that I'm part of the fellows of MORS. There are definitely those that, when I look at the history of who has been a fellow, they have shaped the operations research practice and set the standard for the quality of operations research throughout the Department of Defense and into the Department of Homeland Security. So it's pretty impressive group. And to Renee's point, fellows are elected as fellows because a fellow is expected to have had long-standing and long-term commitment to the society, service to the society, with an expectation that will continue to serve. And so Renee and I still stay very active in MORS. Um, Renee and I were both on the executive council as board members. We were voted to the executive council, and we've given a lot of years and a lot of volunteering time to the society, and I absolutely love it. I am leading. I am the chair of the logistics community of practice, which I established right after I was president. So in 2018, I established that, and I participate, and I started the Gene Visco Prize, who's named after another Morse Fellow, a very distinguished fellow of the society, and I've been a head judge for almost every year since we've started that prize, and Renee's been a judge too, and it's such an honor because we get to interact with and talk to a lot of the more junior analysts within the society, those who are starting out in their career, and we help mentor and review some of the really, really amazing work that's being produced at that level.
So I have a real general question, um, because that level of involvement and everything like that, it's it's really interesting, and it's probably a large commitment uh, to be involved in. But it seems like operations research analysts love doing operations research, analyzing. But and I know that just because of working with you guys all the time, and Norm, I've worked with you for quite a while, and everything like that. But I will get the question, but I never appropriately answer, like, not just what CANA does, but what does an operations research analyst do? Because you guys have a whole organization that is a bunch of operations research analysts. And until I worked at the previous company that Norm and I worked for at one point in time, I had no idea what an operations research analyst was, and I still vaguely can explain it to anybody because I just kind of say, well, they do this and they do that. But how do you describe what an operations research analyst does, at least in the MORS aspect?
I'd love to take that one first. The history of OR, operations research, goes back to World War II and trying to solve some of the big problems that they were having in that war. And the idea is that it was a multidisciplinary approach to solving problems. So you had people coming together that may have special expertise in physics, or chemistry, or engineering. There was many different disciplines that came together, and even social science, all of those. So I would describe OR as a multidisciplinary approach to solving problems. Over the years, many different tools and techniques are part of our practice. It's quite broad. That's why Moores has so many working groups, because it's not just focused on the various areas of the national security and our apparatus and our, those concepts and things, but also the tools and techniques that you become specialized in. So it can be simulation modeling, it can be optimization. There's so many different avenues that you can cost analysis. There's so many different aspects in our profession that you can specialize in, and maybe you're not a specialist in that area, but you're doing a project where you need to gain some expertise. Well, you talk Morse is a great place for you to partner and learn more about that specific area, whether it be a tool or technique, or the area of national security analysis that you're focused in, for solving a particular problem that your client has.
Yeah, I'd add to that. There are, as Renee mentioned, operations research is multidiscipline. There's a really interesting historical component to it. And that history could be like near-term history or long-term, farther history. And but it's all about understanding the operational context, or the situation around which the problem emerges. So if you have a problem, you look at the system or the organizational issues or operational situation where the problem's arising, and that's as important as doing the research component, or building up using the different myriad of techniques and methods that Renee was talking about that are available now. And so you have to really understand both sides, and it brings the applied side of problem solving as much as doing research to understand how to solve the problems better using different techniques. So it's a really interesting blend, and it's evolved over the years. As Renee mentioned, operations really started during World War II, and then soon after World War II, a group of operations research analysts decided to continue focusing on the military aspects, and another group started looking at the commercial side. And so, out of that, several professional societies were formed. MORS is one of them, and then also academia picked up operations research as an academic curriculum, and they started developing their own curricula in the different universities and colleges, and operations research became teachable, and then it became a profession, and out of that profession, many other branches happen. Like we do a lot with data, and you have to manage data. We do a lot with software and computers, so you have to understand computers and programming, and we do a lot with graphics and art because you have to display, and that's a big reason why you and I established a relationship early going in
That's
our
how I got involved.
exactly all the art, which is so key. And like I tell you, I've always told you, I mean, you have to be able to show the results elegantly or in a way that people will understand, at least. And sometimes it's very simple, and sometimes it's complex.
Yeah.
So you bring all that together, and that is operations research. And the essence is problem solving and having a way to support an organization in how they're making their decisions to improve their situation, whether it's a military problem or it's an organizational problem.
Yeah, all those different workshops and different facets of Moors. I remember when I was kind of signing up for it there, and one of the questionnaire, whenever you're going through, it's like, what of these things are you interested in? First, what are you knowledgeable in? But then beyond that, what are you also interested in? So that was really cool because I was like, oh, well, I know very little, but I know a lot about this, nothing about any of these, but I find these things cool, and I'm sure the new ones will evolve over the time because AI, Renee, that you mentioned earlier, that's going to balloon into probably many touch. It's going to touch everything, right? But it's going to have its own kind of like speciality subset of people that are knowledgeable about it, I guess, and all kinds of other things.
I'd say along those lines, like with artificial intelligence, artificial intelligence has been around for a while, since the '70s, and it's not until recently when we've had the ability to really do some of the cool things that have been thought of over the years, and there's been a lot of breakthroughs lately, and it's really interesting to track and see. In operations research, we do look like at that as another part of our tool set, right? It's an evolution of the algorithms that we use to help examine data, and maybe help make decisions in a different way. So I'd say that the other thing that we haven't really touched on is MORS is also a professional development society. So there's a very strong professional education program that emerged, and Renee was part of this at the beginning, and I was part of this and its growth. And we have other caners that provide courses within the professional education program that Morris has. It helps individuals who, like you said, if you're like, hey, I'm interested in all these things, but I only have experience in this one, it allows you to grow breadth and it allows you to grow depth in your skill set. And then, participating in special meetings and working groups and being on the program teams, being on the board of directors, it's its own kind of professional development. And so Moores does provide those opportunities to members and people who want to be engaged and go through that professional development process.
Yeah, it's much more. vast than I originally knew about way back when. Of course, I didn't know what MORS was at all before being introduced to it. But
You
then,
created some great posters before you were even a member.
yeah, so things that I'm sure many people talked about that I even what I drew or came up with, I vaguely understood. But they it was made for you guys, the analysts, the logisticians, the data guys to be able to look at. Um, Speaking of which, like the groups within groups, I don't know how big Moors is, but it's bigger than I thought, but smaller than you would think it might be, type of thing. Um, and then there's groups within that, like Renee, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were heavily involved in the women in Moors section, and I have no idea what the split is. How many? If I do remember some of the posts and information from it, what does clearly the women in Moors section? You have it's made up of all the different working group experts, right? But is there one like section that they tend to be more this or that? Like, what's the largest section of Moors? Like, are they more logisticians or more data analysts or anything like that? I'm just wondering what the breakdown is,
Well,
if anybody knows.
that change. So, as someone who used to monitor that data, you'll see working groups ebb and flow in popularity based on what's going on in the world, what's the type of work that people are being asked to do. So then that may foster what interests they have in working groups. But I'll tell you, it changes over time, and some working groups do get disbanded and new ones form all the time. As data science, that wasn't a thing, and then we started the data analytics working group. Now the women in wars, that's called a community of practice, and community, and Norm mentioned the logistics community of practice he started. So the communities of practice are groups that aim to continue the conversations that are started at the symposium throughout the year. And they may put on presentations, they'll have meetings and do different things. The Women in Wars community is a community of practice also, but it's a little different. It's focused in many areas, but it was to support largely the women in wars, so provide demographics on women in our society and in DoD and the nation at large, provide professional development. We feature trailblazers in our community, both historical trailblazers that maybe they've gotten forgotten in the history. Um, and so we have a lot of fun digging into that, and also contemporary ones. And they don't have to be at the pinnacle of their career, they could be even junior uh, trailblazers that are doing great stuff, but it allows new members to see others in the society that may look like them and say, "Oh, I could do that." Things to aspire to, and all this diversity and mores, and the problems we solve. That's why you said we love what we do. Well, we love what we do because we're people that are lifelong learners. We love to learn, and it's never boring because the types of problems you're being asked to solve, the tools and techniques, it's always changing. There are some people that work in a niche and they're focused on one little area, but most of us get quite a bit of exposure to many things. And so I've had a lot of a lot of different problems that I've looked at over the course of my career, and it's kind of cool. So
Yeah, no, working with you guys, it is a pleasure in the way that's like like to see. It's like, ooh, this thing is kind of cool. Let's delve into that and learn about it. And me being the guy who gets to put together some graphics for it, I never know what I'm going to be putting together an infographic about, because it's like, what am I putting on here? Okay, that seems interesting. Um, but yeah, but you
I
guys
do
get to.
want to point out, yeah, I mean, what Renee was just talking about with the women in Moors is a great example why Renee's Moors Fellow. I mean, she's a leader. She continues to be a leader, and she's a plank holder in that Women in MORS group. And there's a MORS talk, Renee, that I believe you were part of a year or so ago about women in MORS. And it's a really important topic. Um, and it just really acknowledges all the important successes that Morris has had, and it elevates women because women have been a big part of it while not always as recognized.
So I have a question that connects to that with the involvement and everything like that. So I'm not former military, but I was a member of MORS for a brief period of time. But I've been working with military people for 20 years now, everything. But beyond the military aspect, does MORS have like a university outreach to people that are becoming, because Norm, you had mentioned like it's a thing you can go to school for now. Like when I was younger, that wasn't an option that was readily known to me. It might have existed, but nobody came to my high school and said, "Have you thought about being a research analyst?" And I was like, I would have been like, "No," because I wouldn't have thought about it. But
Yeah,
is there like a branch or a
yeah,
how do you get involved with Moors if you're like a student or anybody?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's many ways to get involved, and I think part of the question is how are you exposed that Moors exists? How are you exposed that there's a great opportunity for you to be part of that network, the Moors network, and so I'd say there's a couple different avenues to explore there, and I'll handle a couple, and then I turn over to Renee. And Moors has an colloquium, uh, education professional development colloquium every year, and they host it at a university, and that could be a military university or it could be a civilian university. We've hosted them at both, and within that, I mean, we engage the society engages as universities to bring students together to learn a little bit more about operations research, which is typically the track they're in their undergraduate courses, typically in a math department or maybe computer science. And these students will come together. And so there's an active engagement between Moors and the military and the non military academia to participate. There is a lot of engagement within the military service academies in the undergraduate program, typically in the math departments. And then there's several postgraduate schools where you'll see military and government civilians will attend to get their master's and doctorate level degrees in operations research or a related discipline. And those include Naval Postgraduate School, that's my alma mater, and several other are our caners. Air Force Institute of Technology is another renowned school. And then there's those that will go to other academic schools like MIT or University of North Carolina, and very other renowned operations research programs in those schools where they'll get their master's and doctorate level degrees. So as an undergrad, you get like the base like background in the math side pretty much in computer science. And each of us have our own path from getting here. I was an oceanography major at the Naval Academy, and I got a lot of math because it's an engineering based curriculum, which set me up for my master's degree in operations research, which is very math and computer science heavy. And Renee has a different background. So that's how I'd introduce the answer. And I turn it over to Renee to finish that one off.
Yeah, like you said, Co, when I went to school, um, there was no, there were, I think by the time I graduated college, there might have been 17 universities nationwide that offered graduate programs in OR. Um, my undergrad was math and computer science, and then my graduate degree, again, it was applied math with the concentration in OR from Hopkins. And so that was pretty close. And so, you'll see a lot of people with industrial engineering, systems engineering, as Norm said, math, computer science, but really a broad array of backgrounds that get involved in MORS through their employer typically. That's where a lot of them get connected. They could have been started out like me as a co-op, as a as an intern. Um, and again, it's not just DoD organizations; it's universities that are associated. There's the federally funded research and development centers. There's a lot of um, industry partners that do work with the department. We also have Department of Homeland Security is a sponsor of MORS. That that whole array of national security analysts get involved in with MORS as well.
Yeah, it's so vast. Like I said, I remember years ago it was one of the a bunch of the different things that were highlighted for me. I'm like, okay, yeah, cybersecurity, social engineering, all this other stuff, and so many different. If it's got data that can go along with it or something you can analyze, it's probably in one of those working groups. So I know I thank you greatly for talking with me today. It's been a great spotlight. This helps show what we mean by powered by CANA Analytics here at CANA is knowledgeable and the people we have involved. Speaking of the people we have involved, what do you guys have coming up and how can people reach you? Renee, what do you have coming up and more is involved or anything else? And how would you like people to reach you? LinkedIn, email, whatever.
Oh yeah, I'm easily found on LinkedIn. Also, the Women in Wars has a LinkedIn group, so you can link up with me that way. Um, I did want to mention uh, Walt DeGrange, who works at Kane, and just got one of the greatest awards, the Warner Award, for his longstanding dedicated service to the society. He has, Norm mentioned the continuing education that Moores provides. There's, all kinds of certificates programs, and he's been teaching many of those and has been a professor for quite a while. So, for all of his many things, he wrote a book recently as well with another cane.
Don't give away too much about Walt because I want to talk to him at some point in time on this
Oh, okay.
podcast.
Sorry about
It's a
that.
good teaser.
No, no,
Good
no, it's
teaser.
great because he's the one that said, talk to Renee, talk to Norm. But yeah, Walt, yeah, no, Walt, Walt's what like you guys, you talk to Norm and Renee, so I'm talking to you guys. But Walt is he talking about analysts. Walt couldn't in the short conversation we had to talk about some blog posts and some social media stuff we have coming up about his award and everything like that in CANA in general. He couldn't not give me statistics and some analyst stuff about the award when he's talking about the award. He's like, "Do you know how many Waltz have won?" I'm like, "No." Like, who thinks about how many Waltz have gotten the award? Which is immediately his brain went into like all kinds of like weird analytics and statistics about the award, which is fantastic.
Oh, you got
So
it. You got to record that.
yeah,
It's
it's gonna be good.
good.
It's gonna be a good one.
Yeah.
Norm,
So for me, you can also reach me on LinkedIn. My last name's Reitter, Reitter. So Norm Reitter. On LinkedIn. Also, you can find me on the CANA website, CANA LLC, and my contact info is there. I think there's a link to my LinkedIn from that site too. So there's a couple things I have coming up. Next week, I'm teaching one of the courses in the MORS professional development or professional education. I'm teaching a project management for analytics professionals course next week. I also, as we mentioned, lead the logistics community of practice, and we meet the third Tuesday of every month at noon Eastern time. And so anybody's welcome to join that, and we welcome everybody, whether you're consider yourself deep in logistics or someone who's very interested or someone who's curious. We welcome everybody to join that group. And then I'm involved in a couple upcoming special meetings that are in the early planning mode. One is on uh, wargaming, and that'll happen early next winter in San Diego. And we're hoping to get some food security aspects of that war game, which will be exciting. It's kind of a newer area for the military to be looking at. And then the other special meeting that's just starting right now, the planning is just starting, is in installations and resiliency special meeting that we expect to hold in about 18 months in Germany. So that'll be a couple of really good ones coming up.
And more things I can talk to you guys about. So, actually, more things
Absolutely.
Rob will probably talk to you guys about, who is our normal host for the CANA Connection podcast, because that will be talking very specific about certain things that he will ask much more intelligent, knowledgeable questions than I will about that kind of stuff. Thank you again for joining me today on the CANA Connection podcast. Thank you to Renee Carlucci. Thank you to Norm Reitter. This is Koa Beam signing off for the rest of the CANA Connection podcast crew. You can find links in the description for all the contact information mentioned. And until next time, let me remind you guys to analyze, assess, and execute. We'll catch you later.